The average person operates under a dangerous delusion. They believe that to be valued, they must be seen. They respond to every text within seconds. They attend every social gathering. They explain themselves to anyone who asks. They make themselves entirely available. And in doing so, they unknowingly reduce their psychological value to zero. The elite operate on a completely different frequency. They understand that in the human economy, value is dictated by supply and demand. When you stop being available, a profound shift occurs in the minds of those around you. You cease to be a predictable commodity, and you become a prize. You transition from an emotional reactor to a strategic operator. Welcome back to the Silent Strategist. Today we decode the hidden power of tactical unavailability, and how withdrawing your presence can fundamentally rewrite your position in any social hierarchy. Chapter 1. The logic engine replacing reaction with response. The human brain is a battleground between two distinct forces: the primitive amygdala, designed for immediate emotional survival, and the advanced prefrontal cortex, engineered for long-term strategic execution. The average individual is entirely ruled by the former. When provoked, criticized, or presented with an unexpected social crisis, their immediate instinct is to speak. They react. They let their emotions leak through their vocabulary, displaying their inner chaos to the entire room. In doing so, they hand over the remote control of their emotional state to their opponent. They become entirely predictable, entirely manageable, and dangerously low value. The elite operate on an entirely different cognitive architecture. They do not react, they respond. And the bridge between reaction and response is constructed entirely out of strategic silence. This internal operating system is what we define as the logic engine. To understand the power of the logic engine, you must first understand the anatomy of a social provocation. When someone attacks your character, questions your authority, or passive-aggressively insults your status, they are casting a psychological bait. They are deliberately attempting to bypass your logical mind and trigger an emotional eruption. Why? Because an emotional person is an irrational person. An emotional person makes mistakes, breaks their own frame, and reveals their hidden vulnerabilities. The moment you snap back with an angry retort, defensive justification, or a loud argument, you have swallowed the bait. You have lost the game before it even began. The silent strategist handles this scenario through the strict implementation of the 4-second rule. When hit with a social shockwave, the strategist activates a deliberate, unyielding pause. For 4 full seconds, they remain completely silent. Their facial expressions do not change. Their body language remains perfectly still. Their eyes remain calmly locked on the provocateur. To the untrained observer, this pause looks like a lack of motion. But internally, the logic engine is operating at maximum capacity. During these 4 seconds, the strategist is doing something the average person is incapable of. They are completely separating the stimulus from the response. They are letting the emotional wave crash harmlessly against their internal shield of detachment. They look at the insult not as a personal injury, but as raw data. They analyze the motive behind the provocation. They ask themselves, why is this person saying this right now? What reaction are they desperately trying to extract from me? Where is their position of weakness? By the time the 4 seconds have passed, the emotional trap has expired. The provocateur, who is expecting an immediate, defensive outburst, is suddenly met with a cold wall of absolute stillness. The power dynamic instantly inverts. The silence acts as a psychological mirror, reflecting the provocateur's hostility back onto themselves. The rest of the room begins to look at the attacker as the unstable, low-value entity, while looking at you as the anchor of supreme control. When you finally choose to speak after this calculated pause, your words do not carry the chaotic heat of emotion. They possess the sharp, cold edge of strategy. Your voice is lower, your pacing is slower, and your delivery is devastatingly precise. You do not argue. You do not defend your position. You state a reality, or you ask a single, piercing question that dismantles their entire posture. Rewiring your brain to operate this way requires immense self-discipline. It requires you to view your words not as an emotional outlet, but as weaponized resources. In your daily life, you must treat every conversation as a laboratory for the logic engine. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when a colleague tries to undermine you in a meeting, or when someone leaves a disrespectful comment on your work, your primary directive is to freeze. Do not allow your tongue to move until your executive brain has fully calculated the long-term strategic outcome of the words you are about to utter. If speaking does not improve your position, if it does not protect your frame, if it does not advance your objectives, then silence remains your highest yielding asset. As you practice this habit, the neural pathways in your brain begin to shift. The reflexive, low-value emotional pathways weaken from disuse, while the cold, analytical highways of the prefrontal cortex become thick and highly efficient. You stop being a puppet danced around by the strings of external stimuli. You become the sovereign operator of your mental domain. You become an enigma that cannot be baited, cannot be rattled, and cannot be manipulated. Identity-focused mantra: I do not react to the noise of the world. My silence is the shield of my logic, and my words are executed only by design. Chapter 2. Guarding the mind, silencing the external noise. We live in an era of unprecedented cognitive pollution. Every single day, your mind is bombarded by thousands of external inputs designed to hijack your attention, manipulate your emotions, and degrade your sovereignty. Social media algorithms feed you curated outrage. The news cycle weaponizes fear to keep you compliant. The people around you constantly attempt to dump their unrefined anxieties, shallow opinions, and petty dramas into your mental space. The average human mind is like a house with no doors and no windows. Anyone and anything can walk inside, leave their garbage on the floor, and disrupt the peace. If you allow external noise to dictate your internal state, you will never achieve high-status social intelligence. You will constantly operate from a posture of exhaustion, distraction, and vulnerability. To become a silent strategist, you must construct an unbreakable phalanx around your consciousness. You must learn the art of psychological insulation. The elite understand a fundamental truth: your focus is your actual net worth. Where your attention goes, your power flows. If you allow your attention to be scattered by the trivial opinions of ignorant people or the manufactured crises of the digital world, you are effectively bankrupting your strategic potential. Guarding the mind is the deliberate practice of closing your gates to anything that does not serve your higher evolution, your discipline, or your long-term vision. Think deeply about how much of your daily mental energy is wasted on things that are entirely outside of your control. You listen to the complaints of a toxic coworker. You spend hours reading arguments between strangers online. You worry about social trends that have absolutely no bearing on your personal or financial sovereignty. Every single one of these inputs acts as a virus in your mental software. They create a background hum of anxiety that clouds your judgment, making you easily reactive when a real-life social chess match presents itself. To silence the external noise, you must develop a hyper-selective filter for information. You must treat your mind as a sacred vault that only admits premium assets. This requires you to implement aggressive digital and social boundaries. You must become completely comfortable with being disconnected from the shallow consensus of the masses. While the crowd is constantly consuming, reacting, and gossiping, you must enter a state of deep, silent production. This insulation must manifest heavily during your face-to-face social interactions. When you are in a room with people who are speaking foolishly, spreading rumors, or trying to bait you into empty debates, your strongest defensive tool is complete emotional withdrawal. You do not need to argue with them. You do not need to correct their ignorance. To try to convince an ignorant person of the truth is a catastrophic waste of your vital energy. It is a sign that you still crave their validation. Instead, choose the path of absolute, polite detachment. Listen with a calm, unreadable smile, nod slowly, and offer absolutely nothing of substance in return. Let your silence be a clear boundary that signals their noise cannot penetrate your orbit. When you successfully silence the external noise, something extraordinary happens to your sensory perception. Because your mind is no longer cluttered by garbage data, you begin to see the world with absolute, crystalline clarity. When you enter a social environment, you are not overwhelmed by the atmosphere. You are completely separate from it. You can observe the subtle shifts in the room. You can notice the micro expressions of envy, the hidden alliances, and the quiet power struggles that everyone else is too distracted to see. While the room is drowning in its own sound, your silence becomes a powerful sonar system, mapping out the psychological landscape with perfect accuracy. Furthermore, guarding your mind creates an aura of profound stability around you. People can instinctively feel when an individual cannot be easily swayed by the environment. When a crisis hits, while everyone else is panicking, screaming, and making impulsive choices, the person who has mastered internal silence remains perfectly still. They do not catch the emotional contagious diseases of the crowd. They stand like an ancient stone fortress amidst a raging storm. This unshakable stability makes you an immediate focal point of authority. People will naturally look to you for direction because your mind is the only one in the room that isn't compromised by the chaos. Commit to this insulation daily. Make it a habit to audit the inputs you allow into your mind. If a piece of media, a conversation, or a social circle does not provide structural value to your character, your wealth, or your peace, it must be aggressively severed. Do not feel guilty for your unavailability. Do not apologize for your isolation. The elite do not seek to be popular with the crowd. They seek to master the environment. And mastery requires an uncompromised, hyper-focused mind. Turn down the volume of the world so you can finally hear the profound strategic wisdom born only in the theater of absolute internal silence. Identity-focused mantra. My mind is a sovereign sanctuary. I close my gates to the chaos of the masses, and I guard my focus with unyielding discipline. Chapter 3. The Power of Not Reacting. Mastery of Self. In the theater of human interaction, the ultimate test of an individual's power is their capacity for non-reaction. The vast majority of people are entirely fragile. They are like raw, exposed nerves walking through the world, completely at the mercy of their environment. If you compliment them, their ego inflates with cheap pride. If you insult them, they crumble into anger and defensiveness. If you ignore them, they spiral into insecurity. They possess absolutely no internal emotional anchor. Because they react to everything, they are controlled by everything. They are perpetual slaves to the actions, words, and whims of the people around them. The silent strategist understands that true power is never loud, aggressive, or combative. True power is absolute emotional self-containment. Non-reaction is not a passive surrender. It is the highest, most sophisticated form of psychological dominance. When you master the art of not reacting, you create an impenetrable fortress that completely neutralizes the weapons of your adversaries. Let us dissect the mechanics of a social attack. When an individual attempts to disrespect you, shame you, or aggressively cross your boundaries, they are attempting to project their own internal chaos onto your canvas. They want to see you break. They want to see your eyes widen with fear, your voice elevate in anger, or your body language tighten with defensiveness. Your reaction is their fuel. If you give them a reaction, you validate their attack. You confirm that their words have the power to alter your internal state. You effectively hand them the crown of the interaction. But what happens when they throw their absolute best insults? Their sharpest passive-aggressive barbs, or their most intense emotional tantrums at you, and you do absolutely nothing? You do not frown. You do not argue. You do not raise your voice. You simply lock your eyes onto theirs with a calm, steady, unbothered gaze. You let the silence stretch out between you like a vast, empty desert. In that precise moment, the entire framework of the interaction collapses. By refusing to react, you refuse to accept their projection. You leave their toxic energy suspended in midair with nowhere to go. Because you have denied them the emotional fuel they were desperately seeking. Their own momentum causes them to trip and stumble. The silence forces them to look at their own ugliness. They will begin to feel an immense wave of awkwardness and vulnerability. They will start over-explaining their insult, backpedaling on their statements, or laughing nervously to break the tension they created. They came to conquer you, but through your non-reaction, they have completely exposed and humiliated themselves. Non-reaction requires you to cultivate a deep sense of strategic detachment, a concept heavily rooted in Stoic philosophy. You must train yourself to look at social provocations as mere shadows playing on a wall. They have no inherent power to harm you unless you give them permission through your consent. When someone attacks you, Look at them through the lens of a clinical psychologist observing a flawed patient. See their aggression for what it truly is, a loud, desperate cry of insecurity, fear, and a total lack of self-control. When you view your enemy with analytical pity rather than emotional anger, it becomes impossible for them to trigger you. This mastery must be practiced ruthlessly in high-stakes environments, such as professional negotiations or intense corporate meetings. In these spaces, the person who speaks first or loudest out of emotional panic always loses. When a counterparty uses high-pressure tactics or delivers an unfavorable proposal, the average professional immediately begins to ramble, offering concessions or defensive excuses just to ease the discomfort of the moment. The silent strategist uses non-reaction as an aggressive negotiation weapon. They receive the bad news with absolute stillness. They let the silence sit in the room for 10, 15, or 20 seconds. This non-reaction panics the counterparty. It signals that your frame is too strong to be broken by intimidation, forcing them to negotiate against themselves to appease your quiet composure. To build an unbreakable frame of non-reaction, you must practice daily emotional fasting. You must consciously identify the minor triggers that cause you to leak emotional energy throughout the day and systematically eliminate them. When an email annoys you, do not type an immediate reply. Close the screen and sit in stillness. When someone cuts you off in conversation, do not aggressively interrupt them back. Let them finish their sentence while you calmly analyze their rudeness. When you hear gossip about yourself, do not run to defend your reputation. Let your superior results and your unshakable character speak for you. Remember, people who are easily triggered are easily managed. The moment an adversary discovers your emotional trigger point, they own you. They can pull that trigger whenever they want to make you look foolish or disrupt your strategic focus. By choosing the path of absolute non-reaction, you completely strip the world of its leverage over you. You become a psychological ghost, untraceable, unshakable, and entirely invincible. You anchor your value not in the shifting opinions of others, but in the sovereign, silent mastery of your own soul. Identity-focused mantra: I am the absolute master of my emotional state. No external tongue can disrupt my inner peace, and my non-reaction is my ultimate victory. Chapter 4: Strategic Observation Decoding What is Unsaid. The average person enters a social gathering looking for a stage. They are consumed by an overwhelming, neurotic need to be validated, to be heard, and to project an image of success, because their internal focus is directed entirely outward toward their own performance. They are effectively blind and deaf to the reality of the environment around them. They listen only to reply, waiting impatiently for the other person to stop speaking so they can hijack the conversation once again, in their frantic rush to broadcast their own thoughts. They miss the mountain of psychological data that is constantly being generated right in front of them. They do not realize that the mouth is the most deceptive organ in the human body. Words can be rehearsed, lies can be crafted, and scripts can be memorized to present a completely artificial version of reality. The silent strategist knows that the truth never lives in the spoken sentence. The truth lives in the spaces between the words. It lives in the unscripted micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in body language, and the involuntary physical reactions that occur when an individual is forced to interact with the world. By weaponizing strategic silence, you turn yourself into a human radar system. While everyone else is burning their cognitive energy trying to fill the room with sound, your silence gives you the ultimate luxury, the power of total, unadulterated observation. You sit back, you lower your baseline energy, and you decode everything that is left unsaid. To master the art of strategic observation, you must first understand the concept of psychological leakage. No matter how well-trained a liar or a manipulator may be, the human nervous system is inherently wired to express internal states physically. When a person is experiencing hidden envy, anxiety, deceit, or an intense desire for dominance, their brain attempts to conceal it through their words. However, that emotional tension must escape somewhere, resulting in subtle physical anomalies known as leaks. When you are silent, your entire objective is to cross-reference their verbal claims against these physical leakages. The first area of absolute focus is the face. specifically the eyes and the microtensions around the mouth. The mouth can smile on command, but true emotional alignment requires the participation of the entire facial structure. When someone congratulates you on a recent victory, look past the warmth of their spoken words. Observe the corners of their eyes. A genuine smile creates involuntary crinkling, known as Duchenne markers, around the eyelids. If the mouth is smiling but the eyes remain flat, cold, and wide, you are not witnessing joy. You are witnessing a calculated mask masking deep-rooted envy or resentment. Furthermore, watch for the micro-sneer, a fleeting, fractional second lift of one side of the upper lip. This is the universal sign of contempt. When you spot a micro-sneer during a routine conversation, the logic engine notes it immediately. You do not address it loudly, you simply adjust your strategy, knowing that this individual harbors a hidden sense of superiority or hostility toward your frame. The second territory of strategic observation is the hands and the manipulation of nearby objects. The hands are direct extensions of our survival instincts. When a person feels secure and dominant, their hands occupy open, expansive spaces. They use steepling gestures, where the fingertips touch lightly to signal supreme confidence. However, the moment a person feels threatened, defensive, or deceitful, their hands unconsciously revert to pacifying behaviors. Watch for individuals who suddenly begin rubbing the back of their necks, adjusting their watches, touching their throats, or placing objects like a coffee mug or a smartphone directly between themselves and you. These are physical barriers. Their words might say, "I am completely comfortable with this arrangement." But their hands are shouting, "I am terrified, defensive, and trying to protect my vulnerability from your presence." The third and perhaps most lethal aspect of decoding the unsaid is the analysis of conversational pacing and vocal pitch. When you implement strategic silence during a dialogue, you are creating an unnatural psychological pressure. The average human cannot handle silence. It feels like an existential vacuum. When you refuse to instantly reply to a statement, the other person's subconscious mind panics. To relieve this pressure, they will immediately begin to speak over themselves to fill the void. This is where the deepest truths are leaked. Pay close attention to changes in their vocal baseline. If their vocal pitch suddenly rises, or if their rate of speech rapidly accelerates when you introduce a minor pause, their nervous system has been pushed into a minor fight-or-flight response. They are running out of script. They are throwing random words at you, desperately hoping one of them will make you break your silence. By simply staying still and letting them ramble, you force them to over-explain, contradict their previous statements, and ultimately hand you their entire strategy on a silver platter. To implement this into your daily life, you must transition from a participant to an investigator. When you walk into a meeting, a social dinner, or a high-stakes negotiation, establish your baseline silence early. Do not rush to establish your presence with loud greetings or fast talking. Let your quietness be your anchor. Sit comfortably, expand your posture, and let your eyes sweep the room with calm, non-judgmental awareness. Watch how people greet each other. Notice who looks down first when eye contact is established. This reveals the immediate pecking order of the social hierarchy. Notice who mirrors whose body language. Humans naturally mirror the individual they perceive as the highest authority in the room. By dedicating your energy to observation rather than projection, you effectively unlock a superpower. You see the hidden undercurrents of the room, while everyone else is merely drowning in the waves. You become impossible to deceive because you no longer listen to what people want you to believe. You watch what they actually execute. Your silence becomes an invisible cloak, allowing you to collect psychological intelligence completely unnoticed. Identity-focused mantra. I do not listen to the scripts of men. I watch the reality of their movements, and my silence reveals every hidden truth they attempt to conceal. Chapter 5. Creating Scarcity: The Value of the Unspoken. In the realm of global economics, there is a fundamental immutable law that governs the value of every asset on Earth. The law of supply and demand. When an item is abundant, ubiquitous, and easily accessible to anyone, its perceived value drops to near zero, regardless of its intrinsic worth. Conversely, when an item is rare, highly restricted, and strictly rationed, its value skyrockets, triggering an instinctual human desire to possess it. This economic reality does not merely apply to gold, oil, or luxury real estate. It applies with absolute precision to human interaction, and specifically to your vocabulary. The average individual suffers from a chronic oversupply of words. They talk to prevent awkwardness, they talk to explain their mistakes, and they talk simply because they cannot control the internal pressure of their own thoughts. By broadcasting their minds continuously, they flood the social market. They make their presence cheap, common, and utterly forgettable. The silent strategist handles communication through the lens of deliberate scarcity. They understand that your words are a finite, high-yield asset class. Every time you open your mouth, you are executing a transaction. If you speak too frequently, you inflate the currency of your mind, causing your overall authority to depreciate in the estimation of the room. To create a high-status aura that commands immediate respect, you must systematically reduce the supply of your spoken words. You must force the social environment to adapt to your scarcity. Let us examine the psychological shifts that occur when you transition from overavailability to calculated verbal scarcity. When you are in a professional environment, an executive boardroom, or a social gathering, notice how the lowest status individuals behave. They're usually the ones trying desperately to fill every pocket of silence. They offer unprompted opinions, they crack nervous jokes, and they detail their personal lives to anyone who will listen. Because they are an open book, they hold no mystery. The room quickly maps their boundaries, identifies their intellectual limits, and files them away as predictable entities. They are no longer a puzzle to be solved, they are a solved equation. But when you purposefully withdraw your verbal compliance, the human mind behaves in a very predictable way. It automatically associates your lack of speech with a hidden reservoir of power, intelligence, and status. Because you do not offer your thoughts freely, people must work harder to earn your perspective. When you do choose to speak, the entire room shifts its posture. Because your words are a rare occurrence, they are treated with the gravity of an event. People lean in closer, they silence their own chatter, and they assign immense strategic weight to your sentences. You have effectively inverted the power dynamic without changing the quality of your ideas, simply by controlling the frequency of their delivery. To implement this principle effectively, you must learn to practice the discipline of minimal explanation. Over-explaining yourself is the hallmark of a weak frame. When you miss a deadline, when you decline an invitation, or when you make a strategic pivot, the amateur instinct is to provide a long, winding narrative detailing the why. You explain your logistics, your feelings, and your external constraints. In doing so, you are subtly begging the listener for their understanding and validation. You are placing them in the position of a judge, and yourself in the position of the accused. The silent strategist avoids this trap entirely. If you must decline an offer, a simple, "I am unavailable at that time," is entirely sufficient. If a project requires an adjustment, state the new objective clearly. We are pivoting the strategy to ensure optimal results. No excuses. No narrative. No emotion el padding. By keeping your statements short, dense, and unapologetic, you communicate that your decisions are absolute and require no external authorization. Furthermore, verbal scarcity gives you the ultimate advantage in any competitive scenario. It makes you completely unreadable. In warfare and high-stakes business, the most dangerous adversary is the one whose next move cannot be forecasted. When you talk too much, you inadvertently map out your fears, your biases, and your limitations for your opponents to see. They can hear exactly what triggers your defensiveness and what flatters your ego. But when you remain a vault of silence, you present a smooth, impenetrable mirror. Your enemies cannot tell if your quietness stems from supreme confidence, hidden malice, or deep analytical plotting. This absolute lack of data paralyzes their strategic confidence. They will stall their attacks, overthink their choices, and hesitate out of an instinctual fear of the unknown. Begin treating your vocabulary with the reverence of a premium luxury brand. Before you utter a sentence, run it through a strict internal audit. Is this comment absolutely necessary? Does it elevate my position, protect my frame, or deliver essential data? Or am I speaking simply to comfort my own social anxiety? If the answer does not serve your strategic vision, Pull the words back behind the gate of your teeth. Let others exhaust themselves running their mouths. Let them cheapen their status through overexposure. Your path is the path of the unseen master, the one who controls the room not by shouting from the stage, but by dictating the value of the environment through the absolute scarcity of their presence. Identity-focused mantra: my words are an elite resource. I do not cheapen my value through overexposure, and my scarcity forces the world to respect my frame. Chapter 6: Strategic Humility, the Art of Winning Quietly. The modern world is obsessed with the theater of noisy achievement. We live in a culture that incentivizes individuals to celebrate their victories before they have even crossed the finish line. People broadcast their daily grinds on social media, boast about their financial goals, and visually display their minor successes to secure the cheap, temporary dopamine of public applause. This loud behavior is driven entirely by a fragile, malnourished ego. The average individual cannot bear the weight of unrecorded progress. They need the crowd to look at them, envy them, and validate their existence. In their desperation to be seen as a winner, they commit a fatal strategic blunder. They broadcast their hand to the entire room, turning themselves into an immediate target for envy, sabotage, and competition. The silent strategist practices a far more lethal discipline: the art of strategic humility. This is the calculated practice of hiding your power, downplaying your intelligence, and winning your battles in complete, unvarnished silence. You do not seek to be recognized as the smartest person in the room. In fact, you often find it highly advantageous to let others believe they are superior to you. Why? Because when people believe they are smarter, faster, and more competent than you, their ego relaxes. They drop their psychological guard, cease to view you as a threat, and expose their flanks to your observation. Humility is not weakness. It is the ultimate camouflage of the elite strategist. Let us dissect the strategic utility of letting others underestimate your frame. When you enter a new organization, a fresh business venture, or a competitive social circle, the amateur instinct is to immediately announce your credentials. They want everyone to know their background, their past victories, and their immense capabilities. This loud posturing immediately creates friction. It triggers the survival instincts of the existing hierarchy, causing the dominant players to close ranks against you and look for opportunities to humble your ambition. But when you implement strategic humility, you adopt the posture of an intentional student. You ask intelligent questions, you listen with deep deference, and you let others boast about their knowledge without ever interrupting to display your own. You deliberately allow them to feel like the master of the interaction. While their ego is enjoying this artificial victory, they will routinely leak highly sensitive data, internal office politics, and their personal vulnerabilities right into your lap. They think they are educating an amateur, but in reality, they are delivering full intelligence briefings to a master analyst. You are collecting their blueprints while keeping your own vault completely sealed. Winning quietly also protects your execution from the destructive forces of human envy. Envy is a silent, corrosive emotion that lives in the dark corners of every human hierarchy. The moment you loudly celebrate a major financial win, a massive promotion, or a high-status relationship, you inadvertently trigger the deep-seated insecurities of those around you. Friends, colleagues, and even family members will unconsciously begin to resent your trajectory. They will offer backhanded compliments, withhold cooperation, or actively spread subtle rumors to slow down your progress. By bragging, you create unnecessary resistance on your path to dominance. Strategic humility eliminates this friction entirely. You build your empires in the dark. You scale your income, optimize your health, and execute your long-term plays beneath the radar of public attention. When you achieve a massive breakthrough, you do not look for a stage to announce it. You receive the success with a calm, understated nod, pocket the results, and immediately move on to the next objective. If people ask about your progress, you offer a minimized, modest response. We are making steady progress, but there is still a long way to go. By downplaying your trajectory, you disarm envy before it can form. You let your competitors enjoy the illusion of their superiority while you quietly secure the actual leverage, resources, and control behind the scenes. This mindset requires you to undergo a total divorce from your emotional ego. You must reach a point of psychological maturity where the actual possession of power is infinitely more satisfying than the public appearance of it. What does it matter if the crowd thinks you are average, as long as you own the asset? Control the narrative and possess absolute sovereignty over your life. Let the low-value operators chase the empty applause of the masses. Let them burn their energy posturing on a digital stage. Your arena is the arena of concrete results. You move like a phantom through the social landscape, quiet, unassuming, and completely lethal. By the time your competitors finally realize you are a master operator, you have already secured the board, captured the pieces, and won the game in total. Magnificent silence. Identity-focused mantra. I do not hunt for the applause of the crowd. I build my victories in the shadows, and I let my quiet execution speak for my power. Chapter 7. Emotional detachment, the armor of awareness. The greatest vulnerability any human being can possess is emotional hyperreactivity. Most individuals operate through life as emotional mirrors of their environment. If their day is smooth, they are calm. If they encounter an aggressive driver, a critical boss, or a chaotic market dip, their internal world immediately descends into madness. They leak their focus, anger, and anxiety into every interaction, allowing external volatility to compromise their decision-making. In the theater of high-stakes strategy, an emotional person is nothing more than a liability. They cannot see reality objectively because their vision is continuously clouded by the fog of their own immediate feelings. They make choices based on temporary panic rather than permanent logic, drifting from one crisis to another. To achieve an elite level of social mastery, you must construct an unbreakable emotional bulkhead within your psyche. You must cultivate the supreme discipline of emotional detachment. This is the deliberate capacity to completely separate your internal sense of peace from the external storms of the social matrix. Detachment is not a state of cold, unfeeling psychopathy. It is the ultimate armor of situational awareness. It allows you to stand in the center of an absolute crisis, look directly at the chaos, and execute your strategy with the cold, calculated precision of a surgeon. To master detachment, you must first understand the true source of your emotional suffering. According to the ancient Stoic masters, you are never actually injured by the events that happen around you. You are injured solely by the meaning you voluntarily assign to those events. When a colleague attempts to sabotage your project, or a partner lashes out in a fit of irrational anger, the average person looks at the event as a personal violation. They wrap their identity around the insult, allowing their ego to scream in pain. This emotional investment is exactly what breaks their frame. The silent strategist looks at the same scenario through a clinical, objective lens. When someone displays aggression, malice, or disrespect toward your space, you do not internalize it as a personal injury. Instead, you view it as raw psychological behavior. You look at the toxic individual the same way a meteorologist looks at a rainstorm. It is simply an elemental force executing its nature. A storm does not drop rain out of personal hatred for you. It drops rain because that is what a storm does. Similarly, a toxic, insecure person does not attack you out of objective truth. They attack because their own internal machinery is broken and drowning in anxiety. By removing your ego from the equation, you eliminate their power to hurt you. You remain completely unbothered, observing their performance from a position of absolute mental distance. This armor of detachment must be worn aggressively during high-pressure social interactions and negotiations. In any conflict, the person who cares the least always holds the maximum amount of leverage. When you are emotionally detached from an outcome, you cannot be blackmailed. You cannot be intimidated, and you cannot be rushed into a suboptimal agreement. If a business deal falls through, or if a social alliance fractures, the amateur spirals into panic and desperation, making sloppy concessions to salvage the relationship. The strategist receives the collapse with a steady heartbeat. They view the situation as a shifting variable on a chessboard. If the current alignment no longer yields strategic value, they are entirely prepared to walk away from the table without a single ounce of emotional regret. Your willingness to lose the connection instantly terrifies the other party, forcing them to reconsider their demands to keep you engaged. Cultivating this psychological distance requires a daily practice of internal filtering. You must learn to build a conscious barrier between stimulus and response. When an unexpected crisis hits, whether it is a financial setback, a sudden betrayal, or a public criticism, your immediate mental protocol must be to step out of your body. Look at the situation from a third-person perspective, as if you are a military general looking down at a map of a distant battlefield. Ask yourself the cold, clinical questions. What are the objective facts of this situation? Stripped of all emotional narrative? What is the single most logical next step required to stabilize my frame? What can be ignored, and what must be neutralized? By forcing your mind to operate in this hyper-analytical framework, you effectively starve the amygdala of the fuel it needs to trigger a panic response. Let the masses live their lives as fragile leaves blown around by the winds of daily happenstance. Let them exhaust their vital energy, reacting to every minor provocation and crying over temporary losses. Your path is the path of the immovable anchor. You anchor your mind in the deep, silent waters of absolute self-mastery. No external tongue can breach your armor. No social storm can crack your clarity. You stand entirely insulated by your detachment, calm, unreadable, and completely invincible in the execution of your destiny. Identity-focused mantra. I am entirely detached from the chaos of the environment. My internal peace is non-negotiable, and my logic remains unshakable in the face of any crisis. Chapter 8. The silent presence dominating through aura. The vast majority of individuals believe that dominance requires noise. They enter a room speaking loudly, moving frantically, and demanding to be the center of attention through aggressive posturing or continuous chatter. This frantic energy is driven by a deep-seated, subconscious fear of being overlooked. They assume that if they are quiet, they will be perceived as invisible, weak, or insignificant. However, the exact opposite is true in the economy of high-level social intelligence. Loudness is the definitive signature of the amateur frame. When you overexert your physical and verbal energy to make your presence felt, you are broadcasting your desperation to the entire room. You are signaling that you need the environment to acknowledge your status in order for it to exist. You are begging for space. The silent strategist commands space without ever asking for it. They understand that true authority is not asserted. It is projected through the unshakable weight of your physical aura. This is the art of the silent presence. It is the ability to walk into any environment, whether it is a high-stakes corporate negotiation, a crowded social event, or a hostile room of adversaries, and instantly shift the gravity of the room in your favor without uttering a single syllable. Your presence feels heavy, unreadable, and completely dominating, forcing others to naturally adjust their baseline energy to match yours. To cultivate a commanding aura, you must first master the physics of high-status body language. The human brain is hardwired to evaluate the threat level and social rank of an individual based on their physical mechanics long before they ever process their words. Low-status individuals move with rapid, twitchy, and reactive jerks. They adjust their clothing constantly, check their phones nervously, and make erratic head movements. These micro-behaviors signal a nervous system trapped in a state of low-level panic. They look like prey scanning the horizon for danger. To project a commanding aura, your movements must become completely deliberate, unhurried, and fluid. Think of your physical body as a heavy, immovable anchor shifting slowly through water. When you enter a room, do not rush your steps. Walk at a measured, rhythmic pace, keeping your weight centered and your spine perfectly aligned. When someone calls your name or addresses you from the side, do not jerk your head rapidly in their direction. Turn your neck slowly, with deliberate intent, locking your eyes onto theirs before you acknowledge them. This slow-motion mechanical pacing communicates an immense psychological reality. It signals that you are entirely comfortable in your environment, you fear no hidden threats, and your time dictates the pace of the room. You are not running on their clock, they are running on yours. The second core pillar of the silent presence is the mastery of expansive stillness. When you sit or stand in a social space, you must comfortably claim your physical territory. Low-status individuals fold themselves inward, they cross their arms tightly, pull their legs together, and minimize the amount of space they occupy to avoid offending the existing hierarchy. They make themselves small. The strategist does the exact opposite. Drop your shoulders, expand your chest, and let your arms rest loosely but firmly in an open, authoritative posture. When you place your hands on a table, spread them apart comfortably. This expansive use of space is an instinctual signal of apex dominance. It communicates that you own the environment and possess the internal power required to defend your boundaries against any intrusion. Furthermore, once you occupy your space, you must become a monument of absolute stillness. Avoid fidgeting, tapping your feet, or nodding your head continuously to appease the speaker. Constant nodding is a low-value submission signal. It indicates that you are desperately trying to show compliance and secure their approval. When someone speaks to you, listen with a perfectly still head and a calm, unreadable facial expression. Let your stillness act as a profound psychological void. When they throw their arguments, jokes, or provocations at you, and meet an immovable wall of quiet composure, they will instinctively begin to feel under-evaluated. They will overtalk, over-explain, and lose their footing simply because your stillness refuses to validate their performance. The final and most lethal weapon of the silent presence is the strategic use of the unbreaking gaze. Your eyes are the primary conductors of your internal frame. When you establish eye contact with someone, do not be the first to break it or glance away downward. Breaking eye contact first is a subconscious concession of submission. When you look at an individual, let your gaze be steady, calm, and deeply focused. Do not glare with synthetic anger or forced aggression. Forced aggression is merely a mask for hidden fear. Instead, look at them with cold, analytical curiosity, as if you are studying an interesting specimen under a microscope. Maintain this eye contact for a few seconds longer than social comfort normally dictates, especially during moments of silence. This unbreaking gaze signals an absolute lack of fear and a mind that is operating at a vastly superior level of internal certainty. Begin treating your physical presence as a high-value asset that requires strict curation. Before you walk through any door, pause for a single fraction of a second to reset your nervous system. Drop your baseline energy, slow your breathing, relax your facial muscles, and step forward with the unhurried majesty of a sovereign operator. Do not chase the room. Do not speak to prove your worth. Let your silence do the heavy lifting for you. Let your stillness command the boundaries of the space. When you learn to dominate through your aura alone, you will discover that by the time you finally choose to speak, the battle for respect has already been won in complete, magnificent silence. Identity-focused mantra. My presence carries the weight of supreme authority. I do not fight for attention. I command the room through the power of my absolute stillness. Chapter 9. The 90-Day Unavailability Challenge, Rewiring for Strategic Silence. Theoretical knowledge without practical execution is nothing more than entertainment. You can listen to the philosophies of social intelligence, agree with the principles of dark psychology, and understand the profound mechanics of non-reaction. But if you return to your daily life operating on the same old reactive settings, your reality will never change. You will remain the same highly accessible, easily triggered, low-value commodity that society has conditioned you to be. True cognitive transformation requires you to shock your psychological system. It requires you to actively tear down the old, weak neural pathways of reflexive availability and construct entirely new, ironclad highways of strategic restraint. To achieve this, you must enter the crucible of isolation. You must execute the 90-Day Unavailability Challenge. This challenge is a deliberate, highly calculated 3-month fast from social noise, validation seeking, and automatic accessibility. It is designed to completely reset your perceived value in the social market while giving you the internal laboratory required to master your logic engine. For the next 90 days, you will withdraw your presence from the common arena and implement 3 non-negotiable structural rules across your personal and professional existence. Rule number 1 is the strict enforcement of the digital delay buffer. The modern smartphone has turned the average human into a Pavlovian dog the moment a notification buzzes. They drop whatever deep focus they possess to instantly reply to a text, email, or direct message. They believe this fast response signals efficiency, but in reality, it signals that they have absolutely nothing more important going on in their lives. They are completely reactive. For the next 90 days, you will systematically break this addiction. Never reply to a non-emergency message immediately. Implement a mandatory wait period of 30 minutes to 1 hour for routine communications, and up to 24 hours for low-value social inquiries. When you delay your response, you are communicating an unspoken truth to the recipient. Your time is locked in production, your focus is highly expensive, and they must wait for access to your mind. You are breaking their expectation of instant gratification, automatically elevating the psychological weight of your words when you finally choose to deliver them. Rule number 2 is the aggressive 50% reduction of casual exposure. Look at your calendar over the past year. How many networking events, casual dinners, empty group hangouts, and superficial meetings have you attended simply out of social guilt or a fear of missing out? Every time you show up to an event where your presence is not structurally required or highly compensated, you are delusion testing your brand. You are making yourself a common fixture of the social landscape. For the next 90 days, you will aggressively slash your casual social appearances by half. If an invitation does not directly serve your wealth, your character evolution, or your iron discipline, the answer is a firm, unapologetic refusal. Do not offer a long, winding excuse for your absence. A simple, "I have other commitments that require my full attention," is your shield. Use this newly reclaimed ocean of time to go dark. Disappear into deep work, master new technical skill sets. Optimize your physical biology in the gym, and cultivate absolute internal peace. Let the world wonder where you went. Let them fill your absence with curiosity. Rule number 3 is the absolute elimination of unprompted justification. The average person is a chronic over-explainer. When they make a minor mistake, change their mind, or step away from a project, they run to offer an exhaustive narrative explaining their actions. They lay bare their schedules, their stresses, and their inner conflicts, desperately begging the environment to understand and forgive them. For the next 90 days, you will execute a total ban on this behavior. If you are late to a meeting, do not enter apologizing and rambling about traffic. Walk in calmly. Occupy your seat with poise and say, "Thank you for waiting, let us begin the briefing." If you choose to step down from a social obligation, state your boundary cleanly without any protective padding. By stripping your communication of defensive explanations, you signal an immensely high level of psychological autonomy. You demonstrate that you are the sole authorizer of your choices, and you require no external validation to legitimize your reality. This 90-day crucible will not be easy. The first few weeks will trigger an intense psychological itch. Your ego will scream for the cheap validation of constant connection, and you will feel an urge to check group chats and remind people of your existence. This discomfort is the definitive proof that the challenge is working. It is the sound of your old, fragile identity breaking apart under the weight of discipline. As you push through the second and third months, a profound shift will occur in your environment. The parasites and low-value superficial connections will naturally filter themselves out of your life, unable to survive without your constant availability. Meanwhile, the individuals who actually matter will begin to treat your scarce presence with immense gravity. They will prepare more thoroughly for your meetings, listen more intently to your insights, and show a level of respect you have never experienced before. You have successfully shifted the market dynamics of your identity. You have stepped off the cheap stage of constant exposure and entered the high-end vault of elite scarcity. Commit to the 90 days. Go dark, build your fortress, and let your absolute unavailability rewrite the entire rules of your social domain. Identity-focused mantra. I choose 90 days of absolute focus over a lifetime of empty visibility. My unavailability is my crucible, and my discipline will rewrite my worth. Chapter 10. Owning your sovereign identity, the sovereign mindset. We have reached the final apex of our strategic journey. We have traversed the mechanics of the logic engine, built the internal fortress to silence external noise, mastered the high art of absolute non-reaction, decoded the hidden data of unsaid communication, and established the profound leverage of verbal and physical scarcity. But you must understand a critical truth. These tools are not merely temporary parlor tricks to be deployed when you want to look clever in a social meeting. They are not masks you put on and take off depending on who is standing in front of you. If you treat these principles as a superficial performance, the social matrix will eventually see through your posture. Human intuition is incredibly sharp. It can easily detect the difference between an individual who is merely acting strong and an individual who is fundamentally constructed of iron. To command an unshakable position of authority that scares manipulators and demands natural respect, you must undergo a complete, permanent bandang shift. You must step out of the old, reactive skin of the victim and fully step into your sovereign identity. You must become the silent strategist. What does it mean to possess a sovereign mindset? It means you are the absolute, undisputed king or queen of your internal universe. The average person's mind is a colony ruled by foreign powers. They are colonized by the opinions of their peers, the trends of the digital media, the approval of their bosses, and the emotional fluctuations of their environments. They are constantly looking outside of themselves for permission to feel successful, permission to feel confident, and permission to speak their truth. They are psychological subjects, perpetually waiting for the external world to crown them. The sovereign operator crowns themselves. You recognize that your validation, your self-worth, and your internal frame are entirely self-generated assets. You do not require the room to tell you that you are intelligent. Your results already know it. You do not need the crowd to acknowledge your high status. Your unyielding discipline already proves it, because you are entirely self-contained. You become completely immune to the standard leverage points of social manipulation. An adversary cannot hurt your feelings with an insult because your identity does not seek their approval. A manipulator cannot control you through a guilt trip because your boundaries do not negotiate with social pressure. A competitor cannot bait you into an unstable argument because your ego is dead, leaving only a cold, hyper-analytical operating system behind. Owning your sovereign identity alters the very molecular structure of your daily lifestyle. You no longer wander through the world looking for places to fit in or social circles to accept your presence. You look at every environment you enter as a grand chessboard, and you look at yourself as the grandmaster directing the pieces with absolute purpose. You move with immense intentionality. You speak only when your words carry the momentum of a direct command or a profound insight. You protect your time with the fierce aggression of a warlord guarding a border. You become entirely comfortable with the quiet silence of your own company, viewing isolation not as a lonely curse, but as the supreme premium luxury of an independent mind. Look deeply at the transformation you have undergone throughout this masterclass. The individual who started this guide was likely someone who was tired of being taken for granted, tired of having their boundaries casually crossed by toxic personalities, and tired of losing their emotional control during moments of high social crisis. But the individual who stands here now, at the conclusion of Chapter 10, is armed with an impenetrable armor of awareness. You have the specific knowledge required to read the unsaid intentions of your peers. You have the practical habits required to freeze your emotional reactivity and activate the devastating logic of your prefrontal cortex. You have the structural blueprints required to weaponize silence, build a magnificent physical aura, and establish a level of strategic scarcity that turns your presence into an absolute prize. Do not look back at the old version of you with regret. Look at it as the raw, unrefined material that was necessary to build the monolith you are today. The old you had to experience the pain of overavailability so you could appreciate the immense power of tactical distance. The old you had to suffer from the noise of the masses so you could fall deeply in love with the majestic authority of strategic silence. As you close this guide and walk back into the social matrix, do not announce your transformation to the world. Do not go to your friends or colleagues and boast about your new strategic mindsets. To do so would be a betrayal of the very scarcity we have cultivated. Keep the shift entirely to yourself. Let the world experience your transformation through the concrete reality of your changes. Let them notice that your responses are delayed, your words are fewer, your eyes are steadier, and your frame is completely unbreakable. Let them wonder what dark, Powerful knowledge you have uncovered in the quiet corners of your isolation. Stay silent. Stay unbothered. Stay sovereign. Keep your eyes firmly locked on your long-term empire, and let your magnificent, quiet success shake the foundations of the world. The game of life is continuously moving, the pieces are spinning, and the social matrix is always trying to compromise your kingdom. But you are no longer a spectator. You are the master of the board. Identity-focused mantra. I am entirely sovereign. I master my mind. I master my focus. I master my world, and my silent identity is an empire that cannot be shaken. Real change does not happen overnight. It happens through the quiet habits you repeat every single day when no one is watching. Take control of your availability. Protect your peace. Reclaim your power. If you found value in this comprehensive guide, subscribe to our channel and tap the notification bell to join our community of elite thinkers. Leave a comment below with the mantra that resonated with your vision the most. Remember, master the game before the game masters you.